to remind you that this meeting will be recorded and uploaded to the Council's YouTube channel. As a courtesy to other members, please put your mobile phones and laptops to silent. And if you're viewing in the chamber, please keep your camera turned off because we'll probably see enough of you face to face. So, do we have any apologies for absence, Lorraine?
Afternoon, members. I'll do a roll call at the same time. So, Councillor Aitken.
Present. Thank you.
Councillor Boyd is an apology. Councillor Bremner.
Yep, I'm sure.
Councillor Campbell Sinclair. Councillor Christie. Mr. Hayes.
Yes, thank you.
Councillor Green. Councillor Hendry. Councillor Hutchison.
Present.
Councillor Logue.
Hi, yes, I'm here.
Councillor Barbara Jarvie. Councillor Jones.
Present.
Yourself is here, Chair. Councillor Mackenzie.
Yeah.
Mr. McPherson. Councillor Monroe.
Present.
Councillor Reid. Councillor Robertson is an apology. Councillor Saggers. And Councillor Smith. Says Chair.
Members, are there any declarations of interest? Take that as a no. Members, item 3 on your agenda is the minutes of the meetings of the previous meeting on the 28th of November and the 8th of December. Can we agree those, please? Thank you. Item 4 is the redesign of Highland Council work programme update. Matt.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, everyone. So this report highlights the ongoing importance of the work of the Redesign Board, in particular with regard to the 23-24 budget strategy and closing the gap. The report updates the board on the current work programme, comprising the major projects and lean reviews, and sets out a series of Redesign Board workshops being scheduled during 2023. Section 4 of the report sets out the context and relevance of the Redesign Board work programme as a key part of the Council's response to the financial challenges, with the major projects aimed at delivering service redesign and related benefits, the Lean and Rapid Review programme aimed at increased efficiency, reduced waste and reduced avoidable spend, and an investment programme with a key aim to increase income. Finally, under Section 4, the report restates the importance of a continued and consistent focus on delivering expected benefits. Section 5 of the report sets out the current major projects with separate reports for each of these on today's agenda. This section also confirms the members of the Redesign Board assigned to each of the projects. Section 6 covers the Lean and Rapid Review programme, and as well as current Lean work such as roads project related and the tree management review being presented to the board today, a business case-led approach will be taken to target reviews where the greatest positive impact can be made. Finally, Section 7 sets out a series of Redesign Board workshops, providing the opportunity for member participation and input. The first workshop is in your diaries, and that's scheduled for the 25th of April. That will focus on renewable scheme opportunities as part of a wider investment programme, a programme aimed at increasing income and delivering wider benefits, including economic, environmental and social. 2 other workshops are to be scheduled, and these will cover the roads budget allocation formula and the asset management related options appraisal for sourcing trades. The recommendations are at Section 2 of the report, and happy to take any questions.
Members, any questions or points from that? Item number 5 in your agenda is the Asset Management and Hybrid Working Project. Mark.
Thank you, Convener. So this report is to give you an update on what's been happening with the office-based review, and then to give some indications of what next steps might look like. And so just in context, the project's an ongoing initiative originally that we were looking at £1 million worth of ongoing recurring revenue budget savings to be delivered principally from rationalisation of the office estate. We've done a little bit of tweaking around the edges of that, and that target's now been revised to 1.3 million, although it's worth saying that by the end of next month, we will have already realised around about £500,000 worth of that target. So whilst I appreciate there's been some comment about the pace of change in the past, all of which has been perfectly reasonable and fair, we are now starting to actually see real cashable benefits be delivered as a consequence. So what the project focus has been thus far is about those recurring revenue savings to the general fund. As I say, it's largely been based around office-based accommodation. What the future work streams will look like is that over the next 12 months, we will continue with the progress on rationalising the office estate, and some of the further details of that are contained at 5.6 of the report. But we will also look to start to work towards a range of other opportunities, and those are set out in the other work streams section at 6.1, but include, for example, looking at opportunities presented by council depots. There's a whole Tree Place demonstrator project work going on in Dingwall, and indeed a range of other areas of activities. And I don't prepare to dwell on those. I'm happy to take questions in relation to anything in sections 5 and 6 after I've finished my opening remarks. The final point we say in relation to next steps at section 7.1 is there has been a change in the emphasis of this project over a period of time, away from taking the batched approach to coming forward with permission to do certain things, and away from indeed the 9 key hub and spoke buildings. And so what we're saying here is that with the last redesign board having effectively agreed, the emphasis is going to change to being an assumption that any building is in the scope for rationalisation unless there is a business case to say to the contrary. We feel that's an appropriate point to press the reset button and actually update the project brief, and to take forward that updating of the project brief with the embedded members that are involved in this process, so that we can then have a better defined project brief sitting behind us going forward, which reflects some of those changes that have perhaps organically occurred over the last 2 or 3 meetings. Thank you, Convener.
Members, any questions or points? Councillor Coburn.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mark, for that. Just, I'm quite keen to know where we are with the ALIO. You know, it works well with other councils, and it's something that could possibly be a benefit to us, particularly in areas where we really are stretched for tradesmen and people, and obviously the prices in some areas that are higher than others. And the other thing with the, you mentioned the buildings that with the hybrid working and all the rest of it, are we working in parallel to look at what to use some of our spaces for with these buildings, particularly with a view to some income generation?
Thanks. So to pick up on those couple of points, I think the issue about a potential arm's length organisation of the trades review, I think Matt referred to that in his previous report. That was a piece of work that would be taken forward. We're quite keen to do that, and I am fairly sure that if we can get that to work, that will definitely help us in taking forward the next phase of asset rationalisation, as well as being probably a more effective way of doing business. But it's quite a complicated sort of separate work stream. But I know we'll be coming forward with a workshop, as you heard in Matt's earlier comments, and we can pick up on the detail of that, I think, you know, and take that forward. And it'd be really good to get your comments on board as to what that might look like, because I think there's been quite a lot of discussion about this in the past, as I remember was ongoing when I joined the council 3 years ago, and I think we do need to move that on. In terms of space that's available in buildings once we've actually vacated them, then there are a range of opportunities around that. In some cases, it's us looking to vacate a building and that then being available for other uses. A townhouse is a good example of that. With us vacating, we get a general fund significant revenue budget saving, and then there's a commercial opportunity for that space to be exploited to generate yet more income for the council, albeit in the guise of the general fund on that occasion. So there are a range of different approaches. Sometimes it's about shutting a building, getting out of it, selling it and getting a capital receipt, or at least reducing the revenue impact that the council is suffering. And on other occasions, it's not only that, but it's the additional opportunity to get a win by growing additional revenue space. So we're looking at all of those opportunities, and we continue to explore opportunities with other public sector and other third sector organisations for that sort of shared mutual use of space that would be to our benefit and then enables the whole of us to deliver more savings across the piece, which is to everyone's benefit. Thanks.
Paul McPherson.
Oh, do you not? Oh, Lord, can you hear me? Oh. Yeah. Sorry, just Mark, point 7.1. Don't know about rationalising depots. Spoke for the purpose of the redesign board. I don't want people to think that this is suddenly going to happen overnight. But the point I want to raise, and I think I've raised this at many meetings, including staff side, is the money that was set aside for health and safety and property works. So we're getting an awful lot of money spent just now on Lachlan Street on the new fire alarm system, but we're not fixing the holes in the roofs that are outstanding. So again, as part of asset management, we need to make sure that what we've got sitting available to us now is fit for purpose until we are ready for rationalising depots.
I mean, it's a valid point to raise that there are a lot of challenges in trying to maintain the existing assets that we're having. I know, Paul, you and I have had a range of discussions, including one fairly recently on an informal basis about the whole piece around depots and the need for us to invest in them. I think it is a challenge. I mean, we were successful in getting 2.5 million thereabouts in additional money to fund the improvements to the estate more generally in terms of health and safety, and that included, it wasn't exclusive to depots. And one of the biggest challenges that we faced in relation to that is we could have comfortably spent the same money 2 or 3 times over. There's no two ways about that. So we've had to take some decisions in terms of prioritising what gets spent and what doesn't. And I accept that we won't always necessarily call that out 100% accurately from everybody's perception, but we've tried to get that objective balance right between doing things which are really important to preserve the safety of people in buildings and in depots, and you know, a fire alarm system is very much a part of that, particularly where it's non-compliant. But I do accept that there's a valid pushback that if that is leading to some things in relation to roofing works not being carried out, that's not what we would have hoped for. And I'm happy to look at any individual examples like that and give you a more detailed answer outside of the committee. Thanks.
You want to come back? Are you quite happy with that?
No, not quite happy with that, but again, one of my points was about redesign board, not, or certainly understanding that rationalisation of depots, we're a long way away from that yet. You talk about selling off properties like Dirrybach, you know, for redevelopment. But again, we've raised this before at a lot of meetings. You've got a lot of contamination on these sites. So before they can be sold, there's a spend. So has that been factored in around asset management?
Yes, it will be. I mean, I suppose asset rationalisation, certainly in my mind, and hopefully this is something we can explore as we go through the next steps of changing the emphasis on the project brief, was always going to be a multifaceted approach. So we started with offices because that's what was understood, but we were always going to have to look at assets in the widest range of things in relation to all of the buildings that the council owns, whatever type they might be. So we were always going to look at offices, we were always going to look at depots because of the particular challenges and a range of other buildings. So yes, I think that's a fair comment to say that we're in the early footholds of what we do in relation to depots. In fact, I was in a meeting this morning with some of my other officer colleagues talking about us getting together that information on conditions, starting to prioritise where we needed to go first in our own minds, and what that might look like and what the resource ask was then, so that we were then, when we've completed that work, which is ongoing, we'll then be in a position to have an informed discussion with not only the services but other key stakeholders such as yourselves who've got an interest in these buildings to say, well, this is what we think it looks like and roughly what our hit list of priorities is for shutting or investing in buildings. But we're looking at it from one particular lens. What do you think? What do local members think? What do service users think, etc.? So the preparatory work on that stage is ongoing at the minute, but we'll definitely be getting in touch with key stakeholders outside of this process as well as inside this process to take that forward. Thank you.
Councillor McLean.
Thank you, Chair. I wondered, mine's is not so much about the vacating the buildings, it's who's responsible for doing like the health checks when we have vacated the buildings. I mean, it's not been that long since we had a letter of representation from Roy Bridge Primary School when that was mothballed and the electricity had been left on for about a year. And I know myself, when I was at the food bank in Dingwall, there was a man trying to get into the building that Highland vacated, the old library, and they were wanting to delete the meter. But there seems to be there's no one responsible for doing that kind of end of, when you move out of a building, the process of making sure the lights aren't left on and the electricity readings, all the basic things. Who is the officers? Is that I take it's under Mark's service, but where's that been picked up to make sure that there isn't an extra cost to the council? Thank you.
Thank you, convener. I suppose the question is ultimately, if it's a council building, then it does come back to my service. So I suppose I'm going to have to confess that ultimately it will come back to me, but I'm going to chicken out slightly and ask Finlay or Robert if they would like to comment on the operational issues around that and how we perhaps prevent some of those issues you're describing occurring in the future.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, it certainly comes back to our service, and we've got officers that pick up these buildings when they have become vacated. Certainly on the current round of asset rationalisation, Robert's team's meeting HLH tomorrow on site to look at 30 Nadross Street to make sure that building's been cleared out. And there are a number of mothballed buildings as well that Robert's team and Tom Burton's team deal with as well. So we're just picking up on that around Highland to make sure that nothing's getting left out. It's a good point being highlighted in regards to us disposing of assets as well, Chair. So that work will continue as we go through the actual estate, identifying what is vacant and what's becoming vacant, and also making sure that where we've had challenges before, that records, documentation are removed from buildings as well. We're currently going through that with the Inverness Town House to make sure it's fully cleared of all council relevant documentation before we hand it over for a relet to third parties. So an ongoing process, which yes, we're responsible for. Thanks, Chair.
Councillor Munro.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the authors of this report and to Mark for this introduction. Just at the beginning, we're looking at £1 million of targeted savings, been gone up to 1.3 million. I wonder where the savings have been achieved to get to 1.3. And just in terms of the Portree public sector co-location at 6.2, phase 1, phase 2, I wonder if there's any indication of the time scales for each of these phases. Thanks.
Thank you. Certainly in relation to the savings element, I can speak to that, and in relation to the demonstrator project, possibly Finlay and maybe Malcolm may want to comment on that, as they've been slightly more cited on the detail of that than I have. The original £1 million target was set before my time arriving at the council, so I understand that that came about as a result of previous years' revenue budget savings, and that target was identified as what they wanted us to deliver. I think Finlay and I had a number of conversations around that during last year's budget savings review, and we felt that in the round, and with the more information that we got emerging about conditions of properties in which properties may be able to be rationalised, that we could deliver more than the original £1 million indicative target. So that's why we stretched it to 1.3, but we remain confident that we will be able to deliver on that by the end of the financial year. I think that just to give you an idea, 3.1 is at the bottom of it, it's approximately £500,000 will have been realised by the end of this year, by the end of this April. We had started this year with approximately 160,000 in revenue budget savings that had been rolled forward from previous year. In other words, we made 160 of the target already. coming out of the townhouse will be in excess of £300,000 when that is realised. And I suppose I should have said it earlier in my earlier answer. The good news is all of the staff were moved out on the indicated date. We had made that date by the end of March for everyone to be moved out, which is a considerable piece of work and has involved an awful lot of time and input from many people in Roberts and Finley's team, and I think is something that we have tried to achieve as a council for many years and finally done, so credit to the team.
Councillor McPherson.
Thank you, Convener. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm not a member of the Redesign Board. My points are just if we've got any early indications as to the revenue streams. We've known for some months now of the intention to vacate some of our older buildings. We understand also that it's a crowded property market. So the revenue streams that have been spoken about, are we making advances there? And if so, how are things looking? Councillor McLean mentioned the management of our vacant buildings. And certainly for me, a concern would be stagnant water, leading to Legionella and Legionnaire's disease, and the draining of plumbing if any buildings are left vacant for any length of time, particularly over winter period. And also in repurposing of council buildings, have the council allocated a budget if a new tenant says, I'll move into that building, but only if you can give me this and that. We know that there are challenges with Wi-Fi in some of our older buildings with the thick walls. So is there a budget being allocated for that before we can relet them? Thank you.
Thank you. I'll pick up on a couple of those points, then Finlay may wish to comment on some of them as well. I think the issue in relation to vacant buildings, I think we acknowledged in our response to Councillor McLean, it sits ultimately with me and through me, Finlay and Robert's teams, and to the extent we have accidentally missed anything in the passing of it, which is bound to happen from time to time, please feel free to raise any specific instances of buildings of concern direct to myself, and I'll make sure that they're handled accordingly. I think the issue in terms of relets is an interesting one. So if we have a building that we have vacated, but someone is expressing an interest in, but saying, you know what, it's a bit tatty around the edges, would you do something about it? Then I think that's something that we would be open to that approach about, and we would deal with that in a normal way through commercial negotiation if we felt that that was justified, and hopefully we would be able to reach an agreement on it. But the bottom line is the council cannot afford to simply pay costs unnecessarily if it's commercially justified and it's part of our full cost recovery approach, and it's something we'll entertain. If it's going to be something that's a cost on the council, then I would think it would be difficult for us to be able to justify it in the current financial circumstances that we face. On the final point in relation to revenue, I'd ask perhaps, I don't know if Finley's able to make a comment on that point, and indeed whether he wants to add any additional comments to those I've just made. Thanks.
Thanks, Chair. Just to confirm that on vacating properties, then yes, we do isolate services. We're still looking at keeping fire alarms on just in case there's an issue that someone does decide to try and put a match to a building. And on revenue streams for future reports, what we'll identify is the savings per property will be coming out of. So we'll demonstrate where, i.e. that savings will be coming from, and that'll be year on year savings as we come out of buildings. So it'll be more evident in the next report. Chair, just to highlight the savings, as I've said. Thanks, Chair.
And of course, where we need to negotiate a lease of a council-owned property with a third party, then there would be normal commercial leasing arrangements entered into. Some of that may involve self-repairing, whatever, insurance, etc. So those would be on an individual basis, I would presume, Mark.
Indeed.
Councillor Christie.
Yes, thank you. I think Angela started a really interesting conversation by asking what happens to empty properties. And I just want to build on that a little bit in terms of understanding the cost of dilapidations and with regard to the townhouse, because obviously when the council went in there, the building was not offices and there is no lease for it. So it'd be interesting to hear what sort of dilapidation costs might be associated with pulling out of the townhouse to return it to a state that's acceptable for the common good fund to take back.
Mark.
I think we'd need to have a conversation around that, Alistair, right? I mean, there isn't a lease in place, but then at the end of the day, whether it's common good and general fund, it's all part of the council, and we need to have a mature approach to how we make sure that any of these liability issues that arise from how the building's been used in the past are properly and fairly squared off between both different parts of the council. Again, I don't know if Finlay wants to talk a little bit more about the technical detail about how we get to dilapidations, as that's not my specialism, but as an overarching principle, that's how I would see it.
I don't think that's something with the redesign board to discuss. I think that's something that will be dealt with in the fullness of time. Members, any other questions? Paul?
Just one, I don't know if it's going to fall within the scope of redesign. It's touched on briefly, but High Life Highland. Some of our significant costs are around High Life Highland buildings. I know we say, well, it says here we've moved out of our Draw Street, but what about the likes of sports centres that we own?
That's not something that we will be discussing today.
Okay.
Okay, members, the recommendations are in front of you. Can we agree those, please? Item 6 on your agenda is the Roads Improvement Project update. Malcolm.
Sorry, thanks, convener. So members will be aware we've got a very significant project underway on roads redesign, and you'll be aware of the report basically sets out a progress report of where we are. We've got a fully staffed team which is looking at a whole range of different aspects of this to try and ensure that we are as efficient as possible in terms of both our back office arrangements and indeed our operational deployment, and making best use of the capital we've now got available. So it's just to highlight perhaps some of the things that do go under the radar a wee bit, but which are equally important. In terms, you'll see in the report we've touched on some of the reviews we've been doing. Some of these relate to finances in terms of making better use of our quarry resource, which is over in Skye. So it's not the best placed quarry for anywhere other than Skye, but we do have a significant resource there, and a piece of work has been carried out to look at how it compares in terms of haulage costs compared to what we get from our private sector contractors. And that work is significant because it does help us look at the long-term viability, not just of the quarry itself, but of extending the usage and making our use of it more commercial. So that will be reported to a future meeting, and when it's been thoroughly looked at and ready to be brought forward. I think some of the other things in terms of our lean review work, we've done a lot of work on permit applications where customers actually engage with the service, how we do temporary and permanent traffic regulation orders, because I know that can sometimes be a frustration and a delay, which holds up both member and public expectations of work being done across a whole range of different purposes within our roads and parking services. So a lot of work's gone into that, trying to streamline it, trying to simplify it, and of course trying to speed it up. And we have, as members may be aware, across a whole range of different things in the council, perhaps over time, different areas have developed different approaches to things. So the whole idea of lean is about standardization, and thereby reducing some of the pressure there is on the back office. And we've also done a piece of work about compensation claims, where, again, the different ways of doing it, different points of entry. So we've tried very hard to make sure that we've got something that works best for the customer, but also is something that's published and is much more transparent, because a lot of time is taken up with information requests, etc. Members will be aware we had a budget proposal for more cost recovery than we currently do on events, both mainly the bigger events, just making sure that we do cover our costs wherever possible, and make sure, again, there's a streamlined, clear, transparent process we go through in order to do that. So that work is progressing and will be early in the next few months. And I think Section 7 sets out the next steps. I think one of the key areas we're looking at, as you're aware, there's a workshop that will be held on the roads budget distribution formula. That'll be early. There's a lot of work going on that. But it also goes wider than just the formula. It's also about members and the public having much more sight, or easy sight of the work we are doing, the work that is planned to be done over the course of each year, and progress on reaching these targets. So whilst we go to committee to set the targets, we've got to find a better way of actually making sure that's real life and made live throughout the year. Related to that, some of the big things to be looking forward to in the next wee while are other opportunities for how we better manage and deploy our operational functions. A lot of it, as you know, is driven by our winter maintenance arrangements, but we do need to make sure we are as agile as possible, and that we are sharing resources across all of our areas. And again, that'll be a really important one for members to get their teeth in over the next few months. And I anticipate that apart from the workshop that's been arranged on the budget distribution formula, we will have a number of workshops over the coming year, which will go into much more detail on the individual elements.
Thanks, Malcolm. Members, of course, your post bag will tell you how important this is to our communities. So this is probably one of the bigger projects that the Redesign Board has ever undertaken, and it is really important. Councillor Brennan.
Thank you. I'll endorse what you said about this will be one of the biggest post bag items. But I remember when we requested to take this to the Redesign Board, it was a big request. We knew it was going to be a big request, but I don't think that we actually anticipated that it would become as big a request as it has actually become. As I'm seeing from many smiles, I'm looking around the chamber at the moment. But you can see it's more than just tar on roads, and that's clear in the report that you've got in front of you. It covers everything from traffic regulations, permit applications, compensation claims, verge maintenance. It is so wide-ranging. You can get a feel for the size of teams we are looking at here, and the size of teams that will be affected by the outcomes from the Redesign Board's work here. I think that Malcolm, you need to take it back to your teams and let them know that we really appreciate that this is taking an awful lot of application from roads, everything from roads operations managers to other members of your team who are managing to complement this project going forward, because it's really wide-ranging, and this report lets you see that. Malcolm's given a big enough overview of just exactly what's happening over the next few months till we get to a point where the Redesign Board can come back with some assurance to Council in terms of how Council may want to take forward the considerations of the Board. But that's what's good about the Redesign Board. It allows members of Council to work together to be able to come up with some sort of structured plan on how we can actually see an improvement both for the benefit that we can, the increased benefit, and also the quality outcomes that we should be able to see. In terms of the next phases, I'd like to encourage everybody to get involved in the workshops and to be here in person when the workshops happen. The Redesign Board's fine by doing virtual means, but you really need to be here, especially for something as important as this. I would like to see how we shape up against the work of other local authorities, because we are not the only local authority that has issues with our roads infrastructure, and also with the variable operations of roads going forward. And certainly when it comes to because of the enormity of our geography, the investigation into the roads distribution formula is going to be interesting, but it will also be challenging, because I know in certain areas you have massive geography, sparse communities, but lots of roads, and in other areas you have lots of roads but big communities, lots of traffic and all this, and it'll get into all of that. So it'd be good to see everybody and their contributions in terms of that. The ongoing management, even at this point in time, and I've spoken to Malcolm, and I'm sure some of the rest of you have as well, and understanding right here and now, if we're going to be spending increased amounts of money on our roads infrastructure from here going forward, we need to have, or this is my opinion, I'm hoping that it's shared, that we need to have an understanding of how we get best value outcomes right across the Highlands for that. I had a look at some of the area committee minutes for the roads management over in January and February, and there were variables, to say the least, in terms of what's reported to each committee, and I'd like to see that. The information on that at a greater level, so that you're more informed in terms of any capital investment in your area. You actually know where it's going to go, even before you get the money. And I'm sure Malcolm's taken that on board. And lastly, for me, it will be about capabilities, capacities, and limitations of resource, because we will probably be challenged, as far as I can see, not just for this coming year, but for years to come. And no matter what Council agrees in terms of financial support, we've got to understand that we have the ability to be able to spend it within that year. Because if not, we are carrying over increasing underspends, etc., etc. We have to have confidence in the resource that Council has, and that, as Malcolm was saying, can also rely on external resource as well. So it's about measuring all of that in the months going forward. My last point would be that in 2023, Malcolm's shown and his team are showing that there's a commitment to a workshop to review that formula towards the end of 2023. That would probably frustrate me, as many of you know, and Malcolm knows that as well. But it probably reflects the enormity of the evaluation that's going to have to happen between now and then. And as much as all I would say is that we would be looking forward to this being processed as quickly, but as effectively and as efficiently as possible. That's my contribution. Thanks.
Yeah, members, one thing the council leader just pointed out is the fact that how important the workshops are. The work of the redesign board is not done in this room. Work in the redesign board is done in the workshops, and workshops are very, very difficult to contribute to unless you're actually in the room. So I would really encourage you all, if you want to have an impact on what the redesign board does, then please come to the workshops. It's important. And you are talking about substantial increases in council spend in the next 12 months. So, but that's where that spend goes is up to you as local members. Paul McPherson.
Thanks, Chair. Malcolm, I've just got a couple of questions from a trade union perspective. 6.3, you talk about other reviews likely to have cost avoidance, but in it, your first bullet point's about reducing staff. So I'm interested to know what the thought is around that. And then in your next steps, and I'm hoping it's a typo, but it says decrease in staff wellbeing and trade union relations. So again, I'm keen to understand where the decrease in relations is about to come from.
Aye, thanks, Paul. Malcolm, don't mind if I come back on this. In 6.3, it's not talking about actually reducing staff per se, staff numbers. What it's talking about is reducing staff and/or customer time dealing with applications or requests for information. That means that as you're making the process slicker, staff have the availability to be able to deal with other things rather than the applications or requests for information. And I think you know what those applications for information can be, and they can be quite lengthy in terms of dealing with that. So when you're tying up staff dealing with the processing of information requests, you're not doing other things that can actually make the job slicker. So I think that's one of the points in 6.3, Malcolm.
Okay.
Yeah, I can confirm that. It's about trying to make our back office much more efficient, and we've demonstrated across other areas that there's work to be done, and we just need to make sure that's done so that people can be allocated to more productive tasks, perhaps than they currently are. A lot of time is spent chasing customer inquiries, compensation claims. If we can speed up that process, create much more self-service and automation in the process, then it allows us to use our staff more effectively. The decrease in staff wellbeing and trade union relations, just to be clear, that's not next steps, that's in our risk register. So the risk register is there because we want to make sure we're hand in glove with both our own staff, but also with trade union colleagues. And it's there just, you can see part of the mitigation is to develop engagement, communication, and make sure that we are, helping everybody, but working very closely with yourselves on what we're trying to do through this redesign process. So rather than being seen as a negative, it's definitely a positive that it's been picked up as a really key area to work on.
Risk registers, Paul, are basically there to stop these sort of things happening. That's why they're considered a risk. Let you come back if you want.
Yeah, sitting at medium, you would expect it to sit at low.
But I don't know what to say, Malcolm, to be honest.
Well, but, I'm sure that's the whole point of risk registers constantly reviewed. So if we'll hopefully over the next few months be discussing lots of different changes, and hopefully it'll be lower than low, but that's what the team have decided at the moment. We've got to get going with a number of really big areas, so let's just keep talking and moving forward.
Mike Hayes.
Thank you, Chair. It's just regarding the appendix, where it's regarding the compliance with driving legislation and impact on resourcing levels and service. And it says established legislative requirements. I would hope that they're already in place. Perhaps Malcolm could expand on that one.
Yes, they are in place at the moment. So, but there are discussions around different standards. And I'm not an expert, so, but there are different standards between European and UK regulations. So it is a risk area. So we need to make absolutely sure that we're following both effectively. So there has been discussion. It has actually been discussed, I think, at our service trade union meetings as well. And the main impact here is the challenges we're facing in recruiting, particularly in more rural areas, along with a whole range of other services across the council. There is a challenge on recruitment, and we've got to make sure that we are, where we're asking our existing staff to do more, that we are not breaching any regulations. So it's there just more of a safety net than anything else, because it is something that is very much on the roads operations managers' minds constantly, but particularly during winter.
Mike, if there's anything further on that, I think we obviously it's not exactly Malcolm's forte, but we'll get that taken offline, and we'll have, we'll allow you to have some discussion with as appropriate, Malcolm. So could you organise that, please?
Yeah, I will make sure it's added to our next trade union meeting with the IEE service.
You okay with that, Mike?
That's perfect. Thank you very much, Chair.
Okay. Councillor McPherson.
Thank you, Convener. Thanks for allowing me to speak. I'm not a member of the Redesign Board. In the last council, I asked for a road summit. I said, if we can get together with the suppliers, with the workforce, with contractors and see, and discussing with them and saying, this is what our projects are. Because for me, my biggest concern is that there's a stopwatch and it starts now. Today's the warmest day of the year, of this calendar year 2023 so far. And I'm told by roads managers that we can only operate and fill the potholes in the roads when the temperature is above 4 degrees. So if we analyse the temperature in Inverness and the Highlands, and going the further north you go, the colder it gets, obviously. Inverness is further north than Moscow, as I've stated before. And so therefore we've got from now until the 30th of September with a stopwatch on us in order to carry out all these repairs. We haven't hit it in previous years. What is changing to make sure we're going to hit it in this year? Have we got the flexibility of the workforce, the unions? Are they prepared for overtime? Are they prepared to work through the night? We've got quarries that open at night time. No repairs are done on London's M25 during the daylight hours because they want business and commerce to run. So have we really tackled this with a business-like approach to making sure that we're going to spend all of the money, because all our constituents want us to spend all of the money on our roads, on new tarmac and fixing potholes. And that's counterweighted against a huge increasing number of claims from all kinds of transport firms and individuals. So have we got that? Have we got the workforce? Have we got the people together for it to happen? Because if not, then we're going to be in the same position 1 year on. Have we learned from the mistakes of the past? That's what's frustrating for me, because by the end of September, then all the machinery and equipment and lorries, they're all sat in the yards and compounds for the remaining 7 months, until the temperature rises. So what can we do better to make it happen and get the money spent on our roads? Thank you.
That, Councillor McPherson, is exactly what this redesign board is for. Councillor Leader.
Yeah, that's exactly the point I was going to make. What you're saying there just now, Duncan, is there's a lot of those are shared frustrations with many members and with their communities, and that's exactly why it was requested for this project to come to the redesign board. There's two things in that. One, you've got the operational, the ongoing operations of the teams that are out there that are dealing with the points that you're mentioning there just now as they happen right now. But they will continue to happen in terms of the operation of council right now until this redesign board comes forward with a redesigned service to council. And then when that's adopted, it will have been worked through by the members, it will have been worked through by the officers, you will have thrashed it to bits in workshops, will have thought of all the variables. It's in the papers actually in terms of the impact, and it goes back to the point that was mentioned earlier on about the impacts on other services, because there are impacts on other services. There's impacts on amenities, the winter gritting service, etc., where there are shared resource between roads and other expected service delivery areas. So that it's only going to be at that point, once we've gone through this whole redesign process of what we're actually talking about here just now, that you and others and myself and officers will have something different and something that we can base our knowledge on, saying, well, this should be working better now because we worked at it over this period of time. The faster that we can do that, the better, but it will rely a lot on the data information collection, the workshop outcomes and the engagement with members.
Oh.
Yeah, thanks, members. And the only thing I would add to that, whilst I don't regard previous years as mistakes, I think, there are challenges, there are always challenges with capital programme based on availability, etc. and weather, as you've pointed out. We don't just get the good weather in a season as such, we get a mix of everything. But the one thing we are putting a lot of effort into right now, as in today, is looking at packages of contracts rather than perhaps what's been done, where everything's very area specific. We're actually looking at much potentially bigger package contracts that we hope we can attract some of the bigger contractors into. So that again is something we'll be reporting on over the course. But I think that's just thankfully down to the increase in resources we've been given from council. So that's definitely one area where we're putting a lot more effort in this year.
Members are asked to note the progress of the report. Obviously noted. Item 7 on your agenda is My Council Project Update. And Alison.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. So the paper in front of you provides an update on the My Council project. And just as a reminder, the My Council project aim is around improving our approach to customer contact across the organisation and ensuring that customers can contact us and access the services through a route that suits their needs best. So that's looking at all contact approaches, but recognising that there is a self-serve option, and Malcolm's just mentioned that in the previous item as well, and looking at digital options too. So the report in front of you has two purposes. One is to provide an update on the phase 1 of the My Council project, and there's a summary of that both in section 5 of the report and also in appendix 1. The second purpose of the report is to propose key strands of work for moving forward into phase 2 of the project. So in terms of phase 1, there were 4 identified work streams as part of the project. The first was around developing a customer contact vision. There was a board workshop to explore the shape of this vision at the end of January, and a draft vision is set out in Appendix 3. And the board this afternoon are being asked to consider and agree this as a working vision for moving forwards. I'd highlight the vision for this will be the basis and the framework for developing the customer contact strategy, and that's proposed as one of the work strands for phase 2 of the project going forwards. The other 3 elements that were work strands for phase 1 were in relation to key data sets, and from our data, understanding our customers, services and volumes, around stakeholder engagement. And that was understanding the views of both our internal and external customers. And this strand will carry forward into phase 2, and it's outlined in the report actually that a subgroup has been established, including the Chief Executive, the Corporate Communications Manager and myself, and it will look at informing this piece of work going forwards, but also how we embed customer contact as part of our approach to customer engagement moving forwards. And the final area of work that's been looked at during phase 1 has been best practice, and that's understanding what works well in relation to customer contact, both internally and externally, and certainly learning from other local authorities. So the analysis of the works generated through certainly those last 3 strands in particular has formed the basis of the project workshop at the beginning of this month. And this focused on identifying business problems, but also the opportunities and solutions that flow from them. So whilst different business problems were identified, it was interesting and I think encouraging as well, the fact that the solutions across the different business problems were similar. And section 7.4 summarises some of those key themes that emerged and generated, and you'll see that these have been reflected in the proposed work streams for phase 2. Now this is set out in section 8 of the paper. So there are 4 strands proposed for phase 2 going forwards. The first is the customer contact strategy, which I mentioned already, and that really is to set out the council's approach to customer contact in the future, looking at the methods, approaches, the expectations. And I think it's important to say that those 4 strands that are being proposed, they all interlink. They don't stand on their own. Actually, they're all interdependent on each other. The second strand is around data-led and customer-informed business intelligence. So that's both in terms of using data to inform our improvement approaches going forward, but actually ensuring that whatever processes, any new approaches that we put in place going forwards, any new technology that we put in place going forward, ensures that data and good quality data is a key aspect of what's produced as part of that, and that informs our improvement approach as we go forward as an organisation. The end-to-end customer journey is the third strand proposed going forwards, and that's about ensuring the customer contact and improvement of the customer contact experience for individuals, so that people can have sight of their contact and their queries that they have with us as an organisation. And the final area of work proposed is around customer contact methods. That's in terms of website, CRM and telephony going forwards. So for example, in terms of the website, that's a review of the content of our website, looking at our online processes as well. So within each work stream, which is detailed in section 8, there is proposals around delivering quick wins. So some of those immediate changes that we can make to make positive impact on customers, to address the operational challenges, and finally to deliver strategic and transformational change. So that's detailed in the report. In terms of next steps, Members will recall that £500,000 was allocated to this project as part of the budget setting process. The governance for this spend is through this redesign board. So should the proposed approach be agreed, we will be intending to come back to the next redesign board with the work streams fully developed, and that will include consideration of the resources required to take this project forward, both existing resources as well as proposals to utilise the funding that's been allocated. Members, very happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Members, any questions? Councillor Henry.
Thank you, convener. I'm pleased to be on this project. I just wanted to back up what Alison was saying with the importance of the data that's been used. And I think what's come through is that because the citizen is at the heart of what we're doing here, the importance of data can be used not just here, but in all the other design projects that we're doing, redesign, because unless we know what the customer needs or wants, we haven't really got a starting point. So I think in terms of the redesign board, I think we should always have that in the back of our minds, that we need to have really good, rich data before we can sort of start on really big projects like this. So just to back up that, thank you.
Councillor Coburn.
Apologies, on mute. Thank you. I agree with Councillor Henry that data is key, but I think we have got a problem just now, and we have got a big system problem. So we need to be very proactive with who can issue job numbers. Does it need to be the specific service that's required? There are big criticisms of our front-facing customers, or the challenges of trying to get through to customer services. And I don't think I'm a lone voice in this. It's not a good look for the council. It's not a criticism of any of the teams and the work that the staff are doing behind the scenes, but we need to make it slicker, and we need to think of what can we do in the meantime. Should we be using our service points more? Can they log jobs for whatever service is required? But there's some, even as a councillor, it is really difficult at the minute to get some answers.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it that other than potholes, one of the main concerns that many of our customers have is how to report that pothole, or anything else for that matter. But anyone who's spent any time at all in our call centre will appreciate what a difficult job it actually is. And the staff do their absolute level best to make things better. And that's what this project is for, is to try and make things better. Councillor McPherson.
Thank you, convener. Yeah, and thank you, Alison Clark, for this report. It was just a couple of small points. Presumably, we've collated the information together, so we now know the most commonly asked questions, and they may vary from seasons throughout the year. It would be good if they could be put onto our website, because that may save additional calls. If you say the most frequent questions are this, this, and this, and very often it's signposting. Another one that's been discussed about our customer call centre is, can it be a contact centre as well, in so much as if somebody phones in and say there's a lengthy delay, your call can't be answered, or you're 10th in the queue, a callback facility. Is that something that we could look to put in, and would there be cost implications if that was to happen? But that may remove a lot of the animosity, because if somebody's hanging on the phone, phoning for several times, or hanging on the phone for several minutes, I wouldn't like to be the call handler at the end of that call, because it would be Victor Meldrew, Mr. Angry at the end of it, phoning in. So yeah, these are worthwhile points, and I'm glad to see that the website's looking to be updated as well and modernised. So thank you for that.
Thank you to both councillors. Councillor Coburn, in terms of your comment, I think it's really important going forward that we have an integrated approach to our customer contact method. So whether somebody's coming into a service point, whether they're coming in via the telephony, or whether they're using an online process, it's getting the same customer experience across the board. And we need to think about how we balance that and ensure that customers can come through the methods that they wish to. Councillor McPherson, in terms of the FAQs, I think you must have been in the workshop, because that was one of the things, and one of the the areas that had been highlighted, actually using frequently asked questions, common things that are coming up, actually, so people are not having to look for either look for the information or having to contact the call centre to do that. So that's one of the areas actually as a quick win that we're going to be exploring really quickly. But also in terms of the callback facility, we have introduced a call wait facility, and that has had a positive impact in terms of, as we understand it, looking at the data. But the current system doesn't, the current telephony system that we have doesn't allow the callback function, but that will be one of the things that we're looking at. And one of the strands of work is actually upgrading the current telephony management system that we have in place. And that will be one of the things that we'll look at. And I think it's important though that we test these things to see if it has a positive impact upon our customers. And I think that's the piece about that ongoing customer engagement to understand whether that has a positive impact for customers or actually are there other things that we could trial. So I think that will be one of the key things going forward. Thank you.
Paul McPherson.
Thanks. Maybe keep me right, Chair. But Alice and Mr. Gunn as well, see over there. We did a lean review and a whole project on this a number of years ago, which led to some digitisation in service points. What happened with that? Where's all that data? Why are we now trying to reinvent the wheel and go back through this?
Alice? Oh.
I suppose that would have predated my time, Paul, but equally, I suppose the technology that we have available to us has moved on considerably. And actually our customer expectations about wanting to do more online and self-serve at the time that suits them as well. I think particularly our learning from COVID has highlighted that. So whilst I think there's been really positive developments and customer service has improved over the years, there's always a way to look at this. And I think also, I mean, that clearly from what you were saying, that was very much looking at service points. Actually, this is about customer contact across the entire organisation, how we as an organisation approach that. So, which goes beyond just service points. So I think it's important to take any learning that we have in the past, but also reflect where we are at the moment and move forwards. Thank you.
Councillor Bremner.
Yes, this is one of the newest projects at the Redesign Board. And I can understand the point that you made, Paul, because things do change, and one very big example of that is COVID comes along, and all of a sudden there's massive change in the approach of communities and the expectation of communities in terms of online expectation. And I would suggest that the age profile by necessity in engaging with that technology has made it more accessible for people of a certain age group by necessity in that period of time to want to find out how they can access the council in a manner. And sometimes that can have its own difficulties. But for me, in the paper, and certainly in part of the thought process of wanting to see this come into council, for me, it's being able to relate everything to making the council more accessible. It's not just about how we disseminate information in a manner that we can get appropriate feedback from the communities, but be in a position where no matter how it is that our communities out there find that the council is accessible. And to be quite honest, I would like to see the word accessible and accessibility in the report more times than it actually is. I actually did a wee check there, and I think it's only in it twice. Oh no, disappointing, but you know what I mean. The other thing is in terms of where we are looking at other organisations for best practice. Because I was speaking yesterday out in the street with a couple of members from a local community council, and they were throwing companies, service companies out there, public service companies out there, where they believe that they do have best practice and would love to see the council at least deliver what they're delivering. To what extent that is resourced, to what extent they have software and digital technology to support that. That's where we can find out, a lot more about that. But the way that I'm don't know where the community councils are involved in this in terms of the engagement of the team that are following through on this, but that might be something to follow up on that one. But in terms of reinventing the wheel, actually it's a really good management tool. And I can't even remember what the proper name of it was, but it was like Plan Change Review Act or something like that. So reinventing the wheel is something. It's not reinventing the wheel. It's actually, for me, it's you always should be reviewing something, even if you implemented it years ago. You should always be looking to review that and to make changes to make sure that it's keeping up with the current the current shape of the organisation. So reinventing the wheel, yeah, let's reinvent the wheel many more times, Paul.
Councillor Logue.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I was furiously typing away there. I just wanted to say, first of all, on Councillor Macpherson's point, I think I might have mentioned in the past that I have actually worked in a call centre, although I didn't last very long. And the point he made about call handlers, the type of call that a call handler can expect if a customer has been waiting on the phone for an extended period of time was a very valid one from my own experience. And I do think that it's incumbent on us to do all we can on behalf of our staff to make sure that they are able to conduct their calls in an orderly fashion. So I'm happy to hear that. One of the ways which I think could help, and I think I have raised this in the past as well, is the possibility of the council having some sort of web chat. I know that personally speaking, and a lot of people around my age, our first point of contact, usually with a company or an organization, would be via web chat, and it's a lot more efficient for a customer service representative. I mean, they can be operating 5 or 6 web chats at the same time. So from an efficiency standpoint, it would be an improvement. That's not to say that the telephone service still won't be important, but I was just wondering around about web chat if there's anything in the pipeline on that. Thank you.
Councillor McLean.
Thank you, convener. Quite often, Raymond and I are on the same page, as we were saying yesterday at another meeting. And one of my questions was going to be, where does community councils fit into this? For a number of years, we've talked about having a single point of entry for community councils to be able to contact the council, and I can see where this is good for individuals, but I'm not sure if there's anything going to be built in for community councils to do that. My other question is also about feedbacking. How many members of the public will be checking this out to make sure that it works well? Because quite often, if you're involved in the process, you don't see where some of the issues may lie, and it's good to get, for instance, people with sight issues as well, to see sometimes the colours and everything can affect what people can access. I also wondered about your internal and external customers. I think I'll just put the camera off. The internal and external customers, because I know myself that when I'm speaking to, say, housing staff, one of the issues that they may that we discuss is that when there's a building maintenance problem and a customer's on the phone to the council, they can't then access perhaps the data that's needed to say, yes, that housing issue that or maintenance issue that you've reported is taking place. And I wondered, does that come in under the, where is it, customer? No, it was not on that one. It was further up, sorry. It was on the internal, I think, customer one. Where is that? Anyway, so the other question I had about the end-to-end customer journey was, I mean, at the moment I'm dealing with 3 concerns from people who live, who have reported maintenance issues, and The jobs have been started, but they have not been completed. So although they have a reference number, the council hasn't come back and sorted the problem. Will the customer through the end-to-end journey be able to raise further issues under their complaint number? Thank you.
It's good to see your psychedelic light show, Angela. Alice.
Thank you members for all your comments. Councillor McLean, in terms of your last query, whether the end-to-end customer journey and whether customers can then log something alongside something that they have already logged, I'm afraid that technical query is probably beyond my technology capability, but I will find out for you. I think that's part of our development, though. It is really important, and I think that picks up on your previous point about the housing query as well, about that whole customer journey, so that customers can understand where their query, where their question, whether their request for service is in that process, and that's the principle behind that particular element. So. Technical difficulties aside, I think that's one of those elements that we'll be looking to take forward very much so. In terms of our approach to engagement around about this, you'll be aware that there is a web survey ongoing at the moment, and that's very much targeted at the customers that are already using online. There are two other strands that are immediately about to start, which is around those customers who are coming through via telephony mechanisms and to engage with them. And that's also to understand their experience of that telephony process. And a third one, regarding those who are coming in through our service points. There's then a broader approach that we're looking at the wider public who might not already be engaging with us or maybe do it periodically. But then there's also that looking at targeting, and I think it's back to the leader's point as well as your own around community councils. So some of our key groups that try and link with us as an organisation, that could include our parent councils, but also those who are representing key groups such as Site Action, as you mentioned, and there'll be other groups that we'll be looking at as well. So it's to understand how best we use their experiences to inform our processes going forward. Councillor Logue, I think you're absolutely right. The telephony job and service centre can be extremely difficult at times. We've got a fantastic team who are operating there, but we do need to look at the different mechanisms to reduce the call volumes that are coming in, so ensuring that the public are able to access the way that they wish to and are not having to wait any length of time, because equally understanding why frustrations alike can occur in that sense. Web chat is something that we are certainly exploring. It's one of those key areas of business that could support the customer journey altogether. So that's one of the areas that we are actively exploring. And I think the final point that had been made was around accessibility. And Council Leader is quite correct. It's not in the draft vision. So if members are so, we talk about inclusiveness, but we don't talk about accessibility in the same way. So if members are so minded and are comfortable, I would propose to weave that through the customer vision that's set out in Appendix 3. Thank you.
Councillor Christie.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I agree with the points about web chat. I personally find web chat very infuriating because people don't reply to me quick enough on it tonight. And I think, it needs to be pointed out, if we are going to do that, what the expectation is in terms of response time. I don't know about other members, but I receive probably about 500 letters a month. So if I'm receiving 500 letters, usually from older residents, put a stamp on it, and envelope through the letterbox, very traditional. I assume that the council receives quite a lot of handwritten letters, and I don't see a lot of reference in the documentation to how we're going to cope. And we talk about people will engage in the means that suits them best. So, what's going to be the system for dealing with letters? Because many organisations now are just not geared up to sending letters. I don't know if you've got an idea of how many letters the council does receive, what it does with them. Do they go out to departments for answering? What's the follow-up to make sure they're done? Because I know I get a few complaints about council not answering letters. So I don't know if we've, perhaps ignored an area of communication that's very important to older people. Thank you.
Maybe certainly part of it also could be that, we electronically scan them and pass them on to the appropriate section. Alice?
That is what we do at the moment. And if it's a complaint, it will go directly to the CRIT team for management or to the relevant department. But it is something. It's a good point. We still do receive letters as an organisation. It might not be the primary method for most people, but we do still receive letters.
Members, there are 4 recommendations in your papers. Can we agree those, please? Yes or no?
Yes.
Thank you. Item number 8 on your agenda is the in-house bus operations project. Now we have Malcolm is obviously leading on this, but we also have Ali McDonald, the project manager, Andy Gilbert from the project team, and Valentin Giladi. Have I got that right, Valentin? Giladi. Okay. It's going to be you, Ali.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, Convener, I was just going to, just before Ali gets into the meat of it, members are aware of the context behind this, which is reported to council in terms of the huge increasing pressure we have on costs related to public and school bus contracts. And I think it's just important to set that context, which really informed why, as part of redesign, we were encouraged to bring this forward. And I think it's important right from the start to pay tribute to Ali and the team in terms of how well they've brought this forward to this point. And I think it's just important also that there's the in-house bus operations project, but a bit like roads. And one area that does get overlooked a lot is actually what happens in the back office and how actually we manage the hundreds of different contracts we have right across the Highlands, from individual taxis through to, major, commercial arrangements with private sector operators. So the task recommendations that Ali will cover at the end are actually just as important in this, because it's fine to have a contract, but then being able to monitor, manage and hold the operators to account is just as important. So apologies, Convener, I just wanted to make that introduction.
And members, once Ali has made his presentation, I won't be taking any questions which I consider are of a sensitive nature. So don't ask any financial questions or you won't get an answer.
Thank you, Chair. So as you'll see there from the first slide, the Highland Council's in-house bus operation went live. Okay, can everybody hear me now? Thank you. So as you can see from the first slide there, the Highland Council in-house bus operation pilot went live on the 4th of January this year. And again, as you'll see from the slide there, within 2 weeks, we're feet deep in snow. So that was a challenge, but you'll also be pleased to know that all our vehicles are fitted with all-weather modded snow tires all around, and do seem to help when you're out in the likes of Whitebridge and Foyers area as well. So the vehicles that operate the services are, on your left there, you'll see Volvos. They are 6 brand new leased Volvo single deck, fitted with the latest Euro 6 ultra low emission diesel engines. We purchased used second-hand 6 double deckers, Scania double deckers. They have had an upgrade to their engines, so they are also the latest Euro 6 standard engine. And we purchased one Enviro 300 to be used as a spare vehicle, which is high capacity and can be used on both services for the single decks and the double decks also. So you'll see there the routes that we currently operate, and you'll also see that what I'm mentioning school and public routes. And basically what that means is that, for example, the first one, Foyer to Inverness, is open to the school and to the general public. So it takes entitled pupils from Foyers and the road into Inverness, into the Inverness Royal Academy, but at the same time it carries commuters, some using their concession cards, some fare paying, and also that vehicle runs between Foyers and Inverness during the day. So when we're seeing school and public there for Foyers and Whitebridge, that's these vehicles work all through the day, not just at school time and morning and afternoon. On the Fort Augustus Glenorchy High School, again, that vehicle, once it's done that piece of work, it spends the rest of its day working between Tomach, Strathglass, Kilmorick, Braes, between Dingwall and Inverness, again carrying fare-paying members of the public. Codder Nairn Academy, Codder Primary School, so that vehicle starts in Codder in the morning, operates, takes the kids to Nairn Academy, then straight away goes back to Codder and takes the primary kids to Codder Primary School, and it then operates the Nairn Town service for the general public in between. So the bottom two there, you'll see Kilbokie to Dingwall Academy, and Milton Allays to Milburn Academy. These two in particular not only carry fare-paying passengers, entitled school pupils, but they also carry a number of non-entitled school pupils. For the Kilbokie one, certainly between Maryborough and Dingwall Academy, and on the Milton Allays ones, a huge number of kids from the Wester Inches area, and they are taking advantage of using the under 22 concession cards as well, and they're being well used for that. Just before going to the next one, just need to remember that the actual legislation that we operate these buses under. So the 2019 Transport Scotland Act came into force actually in June last year. We are not operating under that legislation. We are operating under what they call Section 22 community bus permits at this stage. There is a reason for that, which I'm quite happy to explain if somebody asks the question. We're now operating out of premises in Cromwell Road, which we're using as our operating centre. And just in the bottom, that was there was many challenges in setting up this project, as you can imagine. One of the biggest ones being that certainly surprised me at the very start was with the local authority. You would think they own all this land and they own all these premises, and that it was just so difficult to get somewhere to operate from. So we're in there now. We're even getting electricity in a couple of weeks' time. At the moment we're using a diesel generator, but we're all in there. So we've managed to employ a full complement of PCV bus drivers, who are all high quality, experienced professional bus drivers. Valentine here is one of them. Valentine joined us about 4 weeks ago, moved to Inverness, was currently working with Shield buses, and we have quite a variety of nationalities, shall we say, driving for us. So Valentine is originally from Hungary. We have a gentleman from St. Lucia, believe it or not. Why he would want to be here rather than there, I don't know, but we have a Spaniard, and we also have been fortunate enough to employ 2 female drivers to join our team as well. So we're quite happy with what we've got there. In terms of operationally, we have a Facebook page which we've set up through the Highland Council buses, and that it allows us to provide instant updates on any operational issues and anything else that we need to get across very, very quickly. And that page has already attracted more than 900 followers in the first 6 weeks of operation, so it's really good to see that and there's a lot of positivity coming from that. We also have a dedicated web page, which has been set up with details of the services operated in-house, along with the relevant timetables. And we're about to do some minor amendments to a few of these timetables commencing after the Easter holidays. And again, they will be shown on that dedicated web page. Maintenance of the vehicles is carried out externally. Our fleet team currently do not have the capacity to maintain these buses for a number of reasons. So we use Volvo and Inverness and Scania and Inverness. And these vehicles are maintained in accordance with all the current legislation and as set out by the Traffic Commissioner in her undertakings, or our undertakings to them under the Community 22 bus permits. We have everything in place which we need operationally to remain legally compliant with all the various legislation that we need to adhere to, like Working Time Directive, rotas, vehicle checks, etc., etc. Communication with drivers, we've set up a group. We can also communicate with the drivers in real time through the ticket machines to pass information on. The vehicles are all fitted with trackers, which allows us to monitor where they are again in real time, and also allows us to monitor driver behavior in terms of speed, hard braking, fast cornering, etc., etc., etc. I know you keep saying that. In terms of finance, the in-house in-house operation of the service is expected to achieve an annual cost reduction of approximately £1.4 million compared with the lowest tender prices received following the recent round of tendering. Income has also been generated by means of fare revenue by both cash and contactless card payments, which are available to use, along with the 2 reimbursements from the Scottish Government for the over 60s concession cards and the under 22 concession cards. On top of that, we claim what's known as an NSG payment, which is basically a fuel duty rebate. So everything, all live mileage which we have registered is eligible to 14.4 pence per kilometre, which we claim as well. And any additional sources of income are currently being explored, and that will be talked in further detail when we have our first workshop for the bus project. Next steps. So at the moment we have a grant application to the Scottish Government for the second round of the zero emission bus funding. And the first round of the zero emission bus funding was where Stagecoach got their electric vehicles in. So the next round of funding is for smaller and medium operators. So we have a consultant working on that for us at the moment, and that would replace all the vehicles I mentioned earlier with fully electric buses and all the associated infrastructure that comes with that. We've also had initial discussions with Hightrans and the Cairngorm National Park Authority to submit an additional application for ScotsAid funding for electric vehicles to operate along the Aviemore-Glenmore corridor, with potential funding both for capital and staff costs available from the Cairngorm National Park Authority through their Heritage Horizons Fund. And I think next is my colleague Lucy is going to join us just now to talk through the task recommendations. She will join us online.
Thank you, Ali, and apologies that I can't be there with the rest of the project team to join us in person today. So just to provide a little bit of context, as part of the Council's transformation programme, a review of school transport policies and practices was undertaken by the TASC Partnership, who are a specialist passenger transport consultancy. The review was wide-ranging. It covered legal compliance, eligibility, cost pressures and options for making savings, including alternative means of provision, operational practices and safety. One of several recommendations from the report is the procurement of a specialist transport management software that will provide functionality beyond the capabilities of the existing Excel system. Can I have the next slide, please, Ali? So the scheduling and costing functions of the software will support the daily operation of the in-house bus pilot, ensuring that every possible efficiency saving is made. This will streamline the expansion of the project. In terms of transport management more generally, and I know Malcolm touched on this in his introduction, the software will facilitate the optimisation of the transport network and will provide more effective cost monitoring and analysis, which will allow for improved rationalisation of transport needs. The procurement of the software will result in significant efficiency savings, allowing for staff resource to be reallocated to other core functions of the service, such as contract compliance monitoring. Increased performance monitoring, coupled with a dedicated module for recording compliance checks, penalties, and default points, will increase transparency and will allow us to identify services or operators who are underperforming from the agreed conditions of contract. This will ensure that we're achieving a high standard and good value for money on both internal and external contracts. Next slide, please, Ali. So in terms of a timeline, TAS have been commissioned as technical consultants to support us through the procurement process. At the start of December, we published a request for information, and we've had a good number of responses from interested suppliers. In the weeks since, a stakeholder group has been established, and we've been working closely with the ICT transformation and procurement teams to develop the tender pack. We've engaged with several suppliers and have met with other local authorities to share learnings and experiences of similar systems. We're aiming to publish the invitation to tender for the software in the next few weeks with a view of awarding the contract at the start of June. There will be a bit of an implementation phase, but we'll be working closely with ICT and the chosen suppliers who will support us in the transition. And we hope to have the system fully functional by the start of next year. Thank you.
Thank you.
And that ends the presentation, and we're quite happy to take any comments or answer any questions. Thank you.
Else, do you have any questions, comments? Paul first.
Right, so I'll jump in quickly first. It's around this software we're looking to purchase. In my day job with the council, we've already got a license for software for route optimization. We've also got another software, Masternaut, that operate or monitors routes for efficiency that you're talking about here. So I'm just a bit confused why we're going to go out and get another piece of software that's going to do exactly the same as what we've already got.
Okay, so we do use Masternaut. Masternaut is our vehicle tracking software system, which is used in the rest of the Highland Council's fleet. The software which Lucy's mentioning is slightly more complex. What we did was we initially spoke to our waste management colleagues who do have a scheduling software for refuse collection and that, but it clearly became apparent that it wasn't fit for our purpose as well. So this is a specific piece of software which will allow one piece of information, so one timetable would then translate into the publicity for that timetable, the bus workings for each of the buses daily, and bearing in mind these bus workings change on a daily basis, and also allowing us to have that single piece of information to use to register that service with the Traffic Commissioner. At the moment, we're doing this all manually. When you do it manually, if I'm doing a timetable and somebody else is inputting that timetable into another system, it's easy to make a mistake. Then it can be published as being a mistake. And in terms of the length of time it's taken us, it's very time consuming. So there's lots of software out there which is relatively inexpensive, which would help.
Just to add on to Ali's point there, we will be making sure that whatever software we do go for in the end, we'll be looking for something that will interface with these existing softwares like Masternaut and any other, the likes of Seamless, for example, so that we have that interface with existing council systems, and we are making sure that the whole process is as efficient as it can be. Thanks.
Right, Keith.
Thanks, Chair. It's regarding section 4.4 and the maintenance. Now, as I understand, yes, there will be a third-party inspection required by legislation, but I don't think there would have been anything to prevent us as a council from undertaking the maintenance of these vehicles ourselves. what I understand, there's no capacity there for various reasons. So my point is, would it be possible to put that question to the Service Health and Safety Committee, just so we can understand the reasons that the in-house maintenance team couldn't have taken on this contract, because with some investment there might have been long-term savings there. So it's just to try and understand the whole situation, why our own in-house team aren't able to undertake the maintenance of these vehicles.
Yeah, happy to do that. We'll add that onto the list as well, albeit the service is actually split between ourselves and Communities in Place. So we'll work out the best place, Mike, and get that on the agenda.
Thanks very much. That's perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, the reality of some of the maintenance agreements, when they are definitely moving in terms of leasing and purchasing vehicles anyway, and sometimes the market is getting ever more competitive in terms of provision maintenance as part of the service. So it's not a slant in any way in existing services. It can be an opportunity from the private sector. And what you usually find, and when you're delivering any services, having a hybrid approach gives you the greatest opportunities for service continuity. So, but I agree with Malcolm, we can sort of take that, more formally to have a full discussion about it if you wish, but just to reassure, there were proper discussions within both services before the decision was taken to go down the route that we went down. Thank you.
Councillor McPherson.
Thank you, Convener. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm not a member of this board. Yeah, a couple of points. You mentioned about social media, Ali. I noticed that organisations like CalMac Ferries, Stagecoach and other private bus operators all use Twitter, and so do Highland Council when it comes to our schools for closures due to winter conditions or severe inclement weather. And if we're encouraging parents to put the Twitter app on their phone for their school closures for their schools, would it not be appropriate that this fits in behind it? Just a suggestion. I'm curious to know about the under 22 use in terms of payments to us, Highland Council, as a bus operator. How does that go through? So whether when somebody uses it as a student going to school, do the council get paid for it, or is it only when I, as an under 22-year-old, would pay when I go from Foyers to Inverness? So that was it. And you mentioned something about Euro 6 engines, and I checked on that. I mean, my background's in the car industry. The new buses that we've got, the engine capacity is 7698 cc, and they're classed as Euro 6. But the older buses are 14 years old, and I understand they came from one of the London boroughs. And these are down a Scania 9-litre diesel engines. They're not listed with DVLA as being Euro 6. So did I mishear you when you said they were new engines, or have we fitted new engines to them? Thank you.
Thank you. On the first point, Twitter, yes, absolutely. I'll speak to one of my colleagues who knows what Twitter is and what Twitter does, and they can keep us on the right track. Second question on the under 22s. So basically what happens is that Transport Scotland have access to our back office, so they can see it every single time when an over 60s or under 22s uses that card. So on a 13 period annually, we get reimbursed from that. I think the reimbursement rate is probably about 54 pence in the pound at the moment for that. So it comes automatically on a monthly basis through our ticket machine system. And on the Euro 6 Scania double decker, so they did start life on Euro 5 engines, but they had the upgrade when they were down in London to Euro 6.
Councillor McLean.
You, Convener, sorry, it was a bit slow there moving. Similar to what Duncan was asking is about the way passengers can access timetables, and I know this is only on a number of routes, and I do welcome the fact that the council does have a bus service, because it was something I remember asking many years ago why we're not doing more of this in-house service to save money. I wonder too, in some locations when you're looking at real time, you have High Trans have provided some real time displays, but that can't happen everywhere. But in other locations, each bus stop has got a number And there was, I wondered as well, especially when we've got so many young people using the bus now, are you looking at an app so that they can see that the bus is definitely coming on time, especially if they're maybe after hours, if they're going to be running later in the day, you might not be able to update Twitter and access that. Is that something that you're looking at as well?
Thank you, Councillor McLean. On the real-time information, there is the capability for our buses to offer that. That I would need to have that discussion with A, Hightrans, and B, our public transport colleagues who look after the publicity and the infrastructure, etc. But it is there. Just to please bear in mind, we are not 4 months yet into the actual pilot project, and there is a wish list of things that we also want to do as we move forward, and we're not quite there yet, and it will take a little bit of time.
Angela, not too long ago, I asked a quite large bus company, could I get a timetable for a certain bus route? And I was told very politely by the lady on the telephone that I could get one on the bus, which seemed to kind of defeat the purpose, since if I don't know when the bus is arriving, how can I get a timetable because I'm not on the bus? So technology is rapidly advancing, and hopefully we will see quite some massive changes over the next few months. Councillor Butt.
Thank you for allowing me to speak, although not a member of the committee. I was very pleased and encouraged to hear in the presentation about the plans for the ultimate decarbonisation of the bus fleet. I just wondered what the plans for this were and over what timescale. I mean, are we talking about an electric fleet or a hydrogen-powered fleet or a mixture of the two? And by when, by what year can we foresee there being a completely decarbonised fleet?
We're certainly talking fully electric. So for the ScotsM funding, which I mentioned, there's two processes. The first process is that we can apply and gain funding to get the money to do the work to apply for the actual funding itself, which we actually found out 2 days ago that we've got that. So we're almost at the next stage. As far as I'm aware, anything that's granted to us this year will be available for us to use next year, so not too far to wait.
Okay, members, you're really just asked to note the progress of the bus company projects and consider the next steps. And I think you've done that adequately well today. So thank you. Thanks, Sally. Thank you, guys. That's really exceptional. And I think she's disappeared, I think. Possibly. Next on your agenda, members, is corporate employability review from Andy McCann.
Thank you, Chair. Afternoon, members. I appreciate that for some of you, the world of employability and how it's organised may be new. It is a very busy and cluttered landscape, but in many respects that's acceptable because it's all about people. It's all about people of different needs, and those different needs can be provided by different organisations, and that's where the complexity comes in. As a very brief background, we're in the midst of a national redesign of employability services across Scotland, branded No One Left Behind. This is all very positive. It's all around the Scottish Government recognising that one size does not fit all. It's all around being a person-centred approach to services, and very much a localism agenda that sits at the back of that. The Council is very much at the centre of that and working and designing services with partner organisations through the Highland Employability Partnership. So employability, this approach is all about aligning and coordinating services across different organisations and making sure that the client is at the centre of that. It's not about organisations operating in their silo and doing what they do for the client. It's what the client needs from that. So to complement this external redesign of partner services, it's time really for us and I use the word to look again internally, but we have already looked again. The current employability service that I manage was the result of the bringing together of chief executives, social work and planning development teams back in 2010. And since then, we've had 2 more evolutions with activity agreements and family firm members from education coming over to ourselves to give a more defined work focus. But as you can see in the report and the draft consultant's brief, across the council, we have services that one way or another contribute to employability. As I say, certain teams like my own are very focused in on employability. It's very much just about what they're about. But for other services, they may be working with clients who are really, it's around, maybe I use the word, getting addressing chaotic lives, getting them ready for where they're able to benefit from employability services to then to progress into work. So in that instance, those services, their primary purpose is not employability, but they have an aspect to that, and it's about how we connect in with those services at that time, whether clients then transfer over or we do things in parallel. So it is a complex world, and it's actually quite complex for the client, let alone for the professionals. Is there duplication of services in the council? I'm not too sure. Some of it might be perceived, some of it might be actual. Is there best alignment of services that aids a client's journey towards work? I'm pretty confident in saying no, that alignment is not as good as it could be. And are we using revenue funds when there may be external funds to do that? Pretty confident within our own service that's the case, but across the council, I'm not too clear. So the proposal here is to bring in an external consultant, and I'll hopefully use external funding to do so from Scottish Government. But that consultant will bring in, and what we're looking for is around challenge independent assessment based on an understanding of national policy and funding. So it's again, what's coming down the line towards us, but also a good transferable knowledge about best practice elsewhere and how others are organising themselves to deliver across this agenda. And again, to me, I'm looking not just within Scotland, but further afield and particularly into North England as well. So we need an internal officers group to support this work. That's underway. And obviously yourself, Chair, bringing to the design board is to bring us to, whatever the findings come along, we may need support just to drive that change within the council. Happy to take questions.
Members, any questions? Councillor Christie.
Yes, thank you, sir. This consultant that we're going to engage to this week's work, will they be looking at Skills Development Scotland, High, DWP, third sector providers? Because that's quite a mammoth piece of work to get all that down as to who provides what. Is there duplication? And one thing that's sort of lacking from this report is timelines as to when, when it will be completed, what will be the milestones, what are the outcomes, how will we know if it's a good piece of work by the consultant? So I think there's quite a lot of things still to be sort of dealt with in this. I don't know, Andy, if you're able to give a bit more information around this, but I think this is a much bigger piece of work than the report actually implies it could be, because there's, especially in Highland, there's so many localised providers of employability services and government agencies and us and NHS for their specialist service, and it's just, I just worry that it might take a lot longer than we think, and like some reports I've seen on other things in the past, might not actually give us the clear information to make informed decisions.
You're 100% right. Where do you draw the lines in all of this? Because the employability services, as I said right at the outset, it's complex. It's quite interlinked between organisations and between ourselves. I think what we're trying to get here is that we've got the No One Left Behind, that wider agenda through the Highland Employability Partnership of where we're trying to get that better connection with the external organisations. So we meet with all those organisations on a monthly. They're part of the Highland Employability Partnership, but we also have 3 area partnerships where the same organisations are there trying to make that alignment and connection across. What we have, in fact, actually was just talking with the team this morning about that and how we're putting together a report for our E&I committee. And a big part of that is that, yes, there's that wider agenda. And yes, we still have to do work there. but we also have to make sure our house is in order. And I suppose this piece of work is around making sure that when we engage with the wider partners, we have our house in order and we're able to say to them, we've got the right connections here, we're getting the referrals. This is the time when whoever somebody's working through with NHS Adult Services or Highland, we've got the connections across so that client journey is correct. So you're right, it's a very complex. I'm trying to compartmentalize that to make sure that it's more focused in on the council and how we operate things, and to have that perspective in the first place. The findings, I think, as I sort of just hinted at the end, I'm just not too sure exactly where all those findings will take us, but that we'll try to make sure that that is focused. The thinking to make sure we have an internal cross-service group, and also with the finance accountants, is to try and make sure that we have a much more focused study and piece of work rather than a consultant going off, because at the end of the day, a lot of the time consultants do what you're telling them, they'll just repeat that back. So we're trying to make sure that we're as organised as we can to make the best out of that piece of work. I hope that answers you. I recognise the challenge in trying to shape what we do accordingly.
Councillor McLean.
Yeah, thank you. And I know Andy and I have had conversations in the past about employability, and I think some of the questions I was going to ask have been covered, but I just wanted to clarify. It really depends on what is it that you're trying to achieve? What does success look like? And a number of organisations do support, whether that be younger people or older people, back into work. Some get some funding for it and some don't, but one size, as you mentioned, doesn't fit all, Andy, and there's different pathways and different amounts of support that are given to people as they transition back into work, or perhaps if it's from school, they're going into work for the first time. So how does that all get fed into what you want the consultant to do? How do you know that you're giving the consultant the right questions to get answers to? Thank you.
If I can get answers to, is there duplication of services, yes or no, and identifying where they are. If I can get a clear alignment or a clear answer to have we aligned things correctly across council services, and are we using external and revenue funds? Those three questions, they are going to be key to what we actually get out of this piece of work. As I said, the financial bit might provide short-term funding savings, but it hopefully will save long-term savings, where we would reduce people's need for council services in the long term, or other public services. So I think in my mind, it's quite focused as to what I'm looking for in the answers there, because as I say, I think if we can get this right and this working correctly, it'll all be about a better client service, better service to that individual to enable them to progress at the right time for the right job. That's really what we're looking for. I hopefully I've answered your question.
Members, can we agree with the recommendation? Thank you. Last item on your agenda, members, is hopefully Mr. Gunn will lead us through so we can see the wood for the trees.
Good afternoon, members. So the tree management lean review, I think in terms of, to start with, the lean review is very much a management methodology that looks at continuous improvement and fundamentally looks at process redesign to see where we can deliver the greatest value and reduce waste. So it's very much process orientated. The first start we did was established a team, because we obviously recognise that tree management cuts across a number of services, pardon the pun, or hopefully that'll be the last one of the day, across a number of services. But I think it is important that you've got single sponsor leads and facilitators involved, but also subject matter experts and operational staff involved as a single team. So the output of the review, ultimately, and what does success look like, if I say, is a standardised process which will incorporate our legal obligations, environmental consideration for all landowning services, reduce process inconsistencies, unnecessary work, and last but no means least, cost avoidance. It's also important that we recognise that the review covers the end-to-end process for all customer inquiries, and this is displayed in the slide for you. So what is tree management? And it's an education for myself get involved in this, I assure you. So the objectives of tree management is ultimately one of three: identifying risk and taking appropriate action where required, compliance within relevant legal and regulatory requirements, and improving stakeholder confidence and trust. What we have to do, obviously, is take into account health and safety executive act, or mitigate health and safety actions that may come our way, which does reinforce the importance of trees, not just from an environmental point of view, but from legal, as well as our council responsibilities as the landowning services. So the process we did is also known as DMAKE, and that's define and measure, analyse, improve and control. And it's quite a disciplined process in getting all the staff involved, whether it's from I&E, whether it's from C&P, education, all the various services, getting all these people with different perspectives that are involved in tree management in different ways, basically to get it in the one place to have conversations about what works well, what doesn't, how can things be better. But that also means not just looking internally within the council, it's also looking benchmarking, looking at what other councils are doing, including their structures in terms of how they deliver operationally tree management services across the piece. So I have a slide later on that covers benchmarking in itself. So it is a very disciplined process, but what it also does, though, is it means that you can deliver these things at much greater speed. The key is you involve the right officers at the right time. So following DMAKE, in terms of what we've done, this is what we've already managed to complete in terms of various actions. And in true lean review spirit, we don't go into detail at this particular board as to what we've done here, but there's obviously further information, if you so wish, behind each of these. The key thing, members, for lean reviews is to get things done that bit more quickly. Right? So these are what we've done thus far. And I said I'd give you an example of how, in terms of benchmarking structures of tree management services to other councils. So these are the councils that have responded thus far. And it has a summary in terms of the area, because they are obviously Highland councils, a third of Scotland is a significant size of council. But nonetheless, some of the things I see there in terms of where you've got tree officers and the arbour teams are their operational officers go in and actually do the pruning and the cutting down the trees. There does seem to be some differences across within Highland compared to other councils in terms of a single service approach, whereas we're cut across at least two services. Now, that doesn't mean it's wrong, because Highland is obviously a much bigger council compared to the four shown here. But these are the types of things in a lean review that we look at and consider, do we have the most optimum model? This isn't about how hard staff are working, this is how most effective the resource management structure we have in place. And that's what we'll continue to review in. Also looks indicatively in terms of the number of staff that we're investing in this function. And at first glance, it would say, it appears perhaps a bit light compared to some other councils, but that's just at first glance. We'll get behind this figures in much more detail. And what I would say is we're working with the likes of Aberdeenshire Council that you could argue is a more comparable size to get some information from them. So if there are an even more like-for-like comparison. So there's some emerging themes in here that we're taking stock of. I made reference earlier about lean review, about getting things done and with target dates. So within having completed the DMAKE and some of the other actions we've done, these are the short-term actions that we're going to do with responsible service and target dates against these. And what we do, we've got a very high-level project board, project governance to ensure, are these targets going to be met? So it's not at the target date and suddenly say, oh shoot, we're past the date. We get some alarm bells in advance of that. Is that going to be done on time or not? And that's the real advantage of having lean reviews done. Perhaps not surprisingly, though, there are some actions that take a bit longer, they're more medium to long term. And also working within the various services, we'll have target dates against these much sooner than later. But again, I keep going on about it. Lean reviews about getting stuff done completed as quickly as possible. And as well as spending time on the short-term actions, getting them done on time, we'll have dates and the work done within these as well. So I'm very grateful, members, for all the staff involved. It just shows when the staff from different services, from different experiences, it's really, really powerful to get that. And I think that's probably one of the key benefits that Redesign gives us across the council overall. So
that's it, and hopefully you found that helpful. Happy to take any questions.
I was just sharing a little wee acknowledgement with my colleague here. When you said on one of those slides that it would appear for the size of the geography of the Highlands, we are slightly light on resource when it comes to tree and arboreal works. I would suggest that you come to Caithness, and if you can find a tree that you can cut down or deal with, you're welcome to try and do that. Bushes and hedges, and I think that it's similar for other areas in Highland. So what we're actually talking about here is where the resource requirement is actually, and there are areas that are a lot woodier than Caithness, but we do have frustration in a lot of places because of the fact that the service crisscrosses other services, and there's an expectation that there is a standalone service that actually deals with tree management right across the council. When and some issues can go outstanding for quite a long time, but there is a process to be followed, and sometimes that can cause real frustration as well. So out of this, I would expect that there could be a good communication opportunity as well, in terms of how the public can what greater level of communication and expectation from the council that the public can expect, but that expectation is managed and well managed, and that I would expect that to come out of this review.
You know, Raymond, we try to do things very fairly in this council. We've got all the trees and you've got all the potholes.
I don't think that that's fair.
Alistair.
Thanks. Of course, one thing the Lean Review doesn't take into account of is the tree management policy or the details of it. It's more about the mechanics of how we actually put things in place. However, the real problem we do have is the tree management policy, which was at the last Economy and Infrastructure Committee and was due to be discussed at the next one after comments made by myself and Kate Willis. And I understand it's not coming to the next one because the work's not being completed. It's going to come to the one after that. But until we actually have a tree management policy, and Raymond, you talked about customer journey and expectations, the tree management policy is not meeting the expectations of residents or people at the moment. So until we've got the tree management policy sorted, we're never going to provide a decent service to residents. We might prefer a more efficient service when we do it, but it's not going to be a service that residents recognise. So somehow we've got to blend the findings of the Lean Review, which looks very good in terms of that. And my view is it should all be in one department, not spread all over probably 3 departments. And if the trees happen to be on education land, probably 4 departments. You know, so I think we've got to get the Lean Review completed, but also see how that impacts the actual strategic policy for the operational delivery. And I think there's a huge gap and a failure with the tree management policy to actually meet what residents want. And you saw that yourself when I took you to meet a resident.
Yeah, just to say the was work does need to be done, but actually I think just mentioned yourself, it actually gives us a time to make the final document correct.
You know, no doubt about Alistair. These Lean Reviews actually don't change policy; they change the process, and that can be really important. It can cut down the number of operations by a huge amount. For the implementation of the policy becomes much faster. And the fact that the policy may not be fit for purpose is for a discussion from McLean.
Sorry, convener, you've all been going really slow motion there. So did you say that I was to speak?
It was you, Angela.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, thank you. I think that the work that the tree officers and others have done over the last few years has been great, but it does come down to numbers. I do have a lot of trees in my ward, and I would agree with some of the comments that's already been made. It is about the management of the trees too, and that it took nearly 3 years to get trees lifted on a pavement in one of my communities. But the work that they did was fantastic. Everybody said it was really well done. It was just the time. But I would ask that one of the issues that kind of came out of it was when we train our staff to do these roles, they then can leave and go somewhere else and be better paid. Is there anything that can be done to keep staff? Whether if we're training them, can they have to stay for 6 months or something after the training? Is that taken into consideration with numbers? I would also say that there's times when we had in Dingwall where there was Dutch elm disease, and there's got to be, every so often there's a major incidence, and I think it's usually contractors that do that work. Are you looking at things like that too, or just about the process? And Alistair's comment about which service is responsible for the trees is a valid one, because often as a councillor, you have to find out what service it's on, because they're the ones that then has to pay to get the work done, and that can take time. So having it all under one service, a bit like the corporate landlord, would be helpful for the public as well as for the day-to-day management. Thank you.
Councillor Coburn. I'm loath to tell you you're on mute, Muriel.
Oh, hearing us, but I made such sense to myself there. I do apologise. I know this is process and strategy getting sort of conflated with each other here, but I think the number of people that are speaking, it's really key that we get something in place, and processes or whatever. It needs to be sorted, because it's a constant challenge for those of us that do have trees in our wards, particularly, is it an income generation thing that we could do with people that are in private homes and private tenancies, and could we be a go-to for the council, safe, qualified tree surgeons, because we do hear some horror stories the other way around. So I think it's possibly a service that we need to provide, but I also think it's a service that we can income generate from too.
Yeah, Muriel, that'll probably come to E&I. That's not part of a redesign process, at least not for this lean review. So members, thank you very much for your points, and thank you very much for today. Hope you enjoyed all the presentations and the discussions. So please come again.